Hey, what's up, y'all? I am Simon Garcia, and welcome to CrashinConvos. This podcast is all about exploring the ups and downs of life, wellness, resilience, and everything in between through the arts of conversation. We'll also dive into deep discussions on existential questions, philosophical thoughts, and how we are a part of something bigger. By sharing my experiences along with those of my guests, I hope to bring you inspiration and a sense of direction through connection, which may help the listener begin to understand and unravel some situations they may be facing. To support this podcast, please subscribe, like, or share with someone you feel it may help. Thank you for your time and your presence. Now, I welcome my next guest.
Good. No, it doesn't.
Fucking ciego afterwards.
I mean, worse than I already am.
Yeah, so just keep the mic like 4 to 6 inches from your face. And then yeah, we'll go from there. So we're good there. We're good there. Looks like we're good there. All right, welcome back to another episode of CrashinConvos. And today, we have a last minute kind of guest, but I'm glad because this is my brother from another mother, growing up in my neighborhood, and I honestly haven't seen him, and we've been trying to get together for God knows how long. And we're kind of just talking right beforehand of all the just the life that which we lived in our own ways in our neighborhood, and it's pretty wild. And some of the folks that may have grew up where we live or in a similar neighborhood would understand. Either way, well, we used to have like many conversations growing up about wild, crazy, stupid, and we've done a lot of stupid shit together. But I figured, I mean, I'm glad to have him on, and yeah, we're just gonna kind of let things go from where they go. Yeah,
Yeah.
man. So thanks for showing up and driving all across America to be here.
No, man. Thanks for having me, and I'm glad that we finally made the time to get together and talk, even if it's on camera.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a good time to just catch up and see what we've been up to. Obviously, I follow you on social media, so I kind of know what takes up most of your time. But yeah, good to be here. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. I know we're kind of like talking beforehand, and yeah, I mean, when's the last time we've actually kind of sat down and talked?
Man, I would probably have to say when I went up to Boston back in
That's right.
2013, I think it was,
Yeah.
and you were stationed up in that area, and we met for dinner, and we walked downtown Boston. I think that was the last time we really had any like meaningful long conversation.
Yeah, and then before that, it was probably like years.
Yeah, yeah.
That's wild, dude.
So uh, again, doing the math, I said 2013. That's 12 years ago.
Yeah,
Where does the time go?
yeah. It's exactly it. Like just thinking about that, like that seems like a lifetime ago. Like I mean, we're all a different person, right? Each day, each moment, each person that we speak with, we're a different after that interaction or that experience. But even at that point in time, I want to say you said that was 2013.
2013.
Wow, that was yeah. That's when I was going through all my shit and I didn't even know it. It's amazing what you get used to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um, and just getting in the grind of things, right? It's easy to stay distracted and not deal with your stuff, and that's fucking crazy.
Yeah. I can definitely relate. It becomes your new norm when you're on the grind, going through your daily routine and dealing with stuff. Become used to it,
Yeah,
become used to it, or just becomes part of your everyday routine, so to speak. Obviously we all deal with different things in different ways, but I can definitely relate when you say um, that you're going through some stuff, and sometimes you don't even realize it. You bear the weight on your shoulders, and you just keep plugging away.
yeah. I'm gonna fuck up this mood right now, real quick. Hold up, because you realize something. It's better for the camera.
Ah, okay, okay. I actually like that one better.
Yeah.
It's like makes it look nighttime, and
Yeah,
the
and it looks
the
better
space looks
on the
nicer.
camera.
Yeah,
Space.
the new frontier.
So speaking of space, you know I brought this up often, but like, and I'm not trying to deflect by any means, but it's crazy how much shit's going on in our world right now, and
Hmm.
now that aliens is like the idea of aliens is like on the back page.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
yeah.
I mean, yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of schools of thought on that, right? Everyone becomes experts, and then at the same time, it's like when I hear people say, "Well, seeing is believing," right? And then I came to this understanding, like I don't know, like 4 or 5 years ago. It's like, well, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I mean, there's different spectrums of light that we cannot see because we're like limited to like our anatomy and
Right,
what we can and can't see.
right.
But there are things that exist in different spectrums of light, and maybe that's where that veil is, right? Of ghosts or whatever, um, or yeah, aliens or whatever. So, anyways,
But in this day and age, and what you said, what stuck out to me was seeing is believing. But with AI nowadays, even if you see it, is it really real?
yeah,
And that's scary. That is very scary.
it is. I remember I was at a buddy's house and we were watching like the Super Bowl or something, and that's another thing I don't do. That's a topic for another for later. But I don't watch football anymore. But I remember it was a commercial for a Samsung, new Samsung, and it was like that feature where you can delete people in the background. And I just, not even thinking, I said out loud, and there was some guy I just met, and I was like, so I guess a picture isn't worth 1,000 words anymore. You know what I mean? Like you
Right.
can just manipulate it. Like how do you know what's real?
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
but when he's, and that's what's crazy, right? Because like when you start to strip away like our reality, and then what is truth?
And it's we'll take politics, not that we need to get into
Right, right.
politics, but we'll take politics as an example, and the recent meeting between Zelensky and Trump and Vance, and some of the stuff that they obviously they let the cameras in for whatever reason, and that was highly publicized, and then some of the things that people did with that meeting with the AI capabilities, with them beating each other up, or changing the words, messing with the audio and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. I mean, obviously a lot of it was over the top, and it's like, okay, I know that didn't happen, but to think that the capability exists now to twist things, to mess with our reality, it's a dangerous tool, right? And we're only now just it's just the beginning. And
Right.
imagine where we'll be 5, 10 years from now. And I feel for our kids because they're going to have to decipher through all that. It's already tough enough for us to decipher through everything that we're seeing, that we're exposed to now. Can't imagine how it's going to be for them.
Yeah. And yeah, it is scary, and people wield it. I mean, it's kind of like monkeys that discovered fire for the first time. They don't respect it, and we kind of talked about drinking earlier, but that's the same thing. Like when you don't respect something, and you just kind of use it like, I'm a fucking sound holder right now, like willy nilly, right? Like just whatever, and then the cat's out of the bag, and then people use it for everything, and
Yep.
then it. I mean, we could go back like to the World War II and like Nazis and stuff, but like propaganda, right? And people just knew what they knew. But like now, like you can twist the truth or like delete the truth, and on many different levels, and then on top of that, it just kind of leaves people like, yeah, just questioning what is true or not.
Right.
I don't know. Do you watch Apple TV?
I have Apple TV. I think the last time I watched Apple TV was back when they still had that show with Jason. Um, Zalakanakis, or no, I forget his name, but Ted, I think it was the name, the Ted or
Ted
something.
Lasso.
Ted Lasso.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
good show.
that was an amazing show. But that was the last time I actually, put on the Apple TV app. So no, the short answer is no. I have it, but I haven't watched it.
So we we have that app, and we Ted Lasso's an awesome. I was just watching another episode. I've seen the season like I've seen the show like twice now.
Yeah.
So many good nuggets in there.
Yep.
But with that, it's there was a show on there that was called For All Mankind, and it was about the space race. And the
Okay.
space race, like the first episode starts off right, and then like someone's landing on the moon. You automatically think, "Oh, this is a replaying or retelling of you know, Lance Armstrong, not Lance Armstrong,
Neil Armstrong. Yeah.
Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, right, the moon landing. But then as it's playing out, it's a a Russian cosmonaut landing on the moon, and the entire like I say for the next two seasons, it was slightly twisting the truth, but entertaining this different reality, like this almost like multi-dimensional kind of reality existence. If I know it was playing out like this would have happened if the Russians got on the moon first. But and it starts to, but I had to stop watching it because I started to entertain the idea like, what if this is like a tactic to un to I'm trying to find the right word, but start to like unwind what memory that you have of the truth, right?
Of history,
Of
in
history,
this
and
case, right? Yeah.
yeah, but in this, but I felt like it was more like nefarious in that, like because you're starting to almost like the movie Inception,
Okay.
where you're starting to and before you know it, when that happens so many times, and what you know as your reality starts to become something different,
Yeah.
and I don't know why I'm aware of that, and maybe because I know of all these other uh programs that existed, like Operation Mockingbird, like CIA did
Sure.
with like with movies and stuff like that, and there's the list goes on and on. But I don't know if that's like another like obviously programming is programming, and what we become, what are what we choose to like ingest, right? With food, information, etc. So like I had to stop watching that, and I was just like, this like something's happening. I don't know what this is, but I don't like it, so I'm
Yeah.
gonna stop.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, and then I think so. Y- you talked about propaganda. Obviously, that's existed for years. I think in today's day and age, going back to AI, it's just going to magnify or amplify that even more. But yeah, there's different outlets. There's different things like programming, for example, to
Hmm.
try to kind of mess with your reality. And I think with AI now being what it is, it's going to be a dangerous tool, because people are going to use it for personal gain, whether it's governments or individuals,
Hmm.
that with power or that are really trying to get power. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where that goes. And then like for yourself, and speaking with how you kind of became aware that, hey, I don't know that I really like this program and what it's the message that it's trying to drive home, or to undo some of my memory or how my understanding of history. For every one person of you, there's probably 100 that don't think that way, and they'll take it at face value for what it is, and
Right,
before you know it, now they're starting to spread what they think their truth is, or the U.S. didn't land on the moon; it was the Russians first,
right.
so on and so forth, and then that just spreads like wildfire, right?
It was almost like an intentional, like overt, like Mandela effect. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like where you think you remember something in some way, but it was actually a different way.
yeah, kind of introduces doubt, and then from
Yeah,
there, that's just the beginning, right?
yeah. It's just
Yeah,
like unlocking that, and then like build on it later.
yeah,
But yeah, you're right. And then like, and I think that's one thing that's lost now. Well, I think maybe the newer generation, hopefully, is starting to question more and not take things as easy at face value, if you will, because
Yeah.
of things like AI and stuff like that.
Yeah. And then for this generation, right, compared to how we grew up, they've got information. Well, everyone does, but for them growing up and being impressionable teenagers, and I'll take, I'll say teenagers as an example because I have one at home, but you know, they get information every day. I mean, within seconds, every minute, every hour, however long they spend on social media. I mean, and everybody's now a news reporter, right?
Yeah,
And so they've got to process, they have to sift through more information to figure out what is true. Or in our day and age, I mean, unless we watched the news, we really didn't know what was happening,
yeah,
or just word of mouth. Did you hear about this? Did you hear about that? Well, now it's the palm of your hand. And then depending on who you follow and what comes up in your algorithm,
right.
helps create that opinion or reality. um, it's just, it blows my mind, man, how far we've come, or how different things are compared to where we were, 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. So it's definitely different for, growing up for younger people, um, as opposed to us.
And
We used to spend our spare time riding bikes outside,
yeah, yeah, dude.
Yeah, these guys spend their time in the room, sifting through social media, and, so it's crazy.
Yeah, and that's and it's interesting, like how, like, because people would just be like, well, it's just a show, it's just this, it's just for entertainment, or and like how all these like independent journalists have like kind of like popped up, right, like TikTok, and I think they do good work, but at the same time, I think it starts to distort reality in the way of where people. I've had conversations often, and it's interesting like how it started to like I know I would notice it. This was like years back, maybe like 5 6 years ago, and I would like, especially when you get out of the middle, you come out of that bubble, and you kind of can start seeing things for what they are. Because when you're in, like, you, even if there's like a new administration or new whatever, that doesn't have to do with politics. You don't have time to deal with it because you're like, well, at the end of the day, I still got to do what they tell me,
Right.
right? Within reason, right? Like
Sure.
there's, but with that, it's like when you get out and then you kind of just kind of see the world for what it is. I was actually having a conversation with a guy had just retired from the I want to say he was like Royal Air Force in Scotland,
Okay.
and he was talking about that very thing when he retired. He was like, like, is this like really happening? Like these things, what he was talking about COVID at the time and like everything that happened with that. And not to go down into that, but it, it's it's interesting to have this worldview and then like to just kind of be brought into a different, like, I guess the civilian population, and then to see it for what it is, and then you kind of see things as they're being talked about in the news, and then like, well, that's, and then know all these other things that are going on in the world, like operations and stuff, and like it just doesn't match up, and then you start to pull the thread a little bit, right? Because now you got time, and then you're just like, that doesn't make sense, that doesn't make sense. And it's and there's a lot of people that just jump on it and they just focus on all the negative what's going on, right? Because
Right.
they're trying to be raise awareness, right? But when you raise awareness so much to the point where you lose the balance of reality,
Yeah.
and anybody and everybody that's online starts to have that what's the word, that cynical point of view,
Hmm.
right? And then everything is that. But like I remember when during COVID, um I drove to Oregon for the bike mechanic school,
Okay.
and I had this concept in my mind based off because I was kind of really in the news, right, with watching like independent journalists and like biologists that were actually kind of talking about all this stuff that's coming to the light. So now we're like, like the virus coming out of Wuhan and all these things, right? And that was like heresy then, right? But and then it was like George Floyd and all these things, right? So in my mind, unknowingly, I expected to drive across country and to see, and I didn't know I until like halfway. I was like in Nevada or something, and I was just stopping at gas stations, and people were nice. People were like, I mean, I might get a side eye from here and there, but It wasn't what was being depicted on online and social media. And so to take that example and then to apply it to people that don't leave the house, that never travel, that just continue to like get their information from or the world from
The news,
the news of their algorithm,
right?
they 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 don't have a true grip on like the being outside in the world, if you will.
Yeah,
And that's dangerous too.
yeah. And you bring up you bring up a good point there, in kind of tying it to COVID. I, I mean, I think we learned a lot. I know the governments, and this is not just our government, but governments around the world, they learned a lot as far as how, and I'll say easy because I thought it was easy. A lot of people, um, followed the orders, right? Like lockdown, do this, do that, and the government controlled us, you
Hmm.
know, and then there was people that even took it to a further extreme, and were wearing masks, when they're driving in the car by themselves,
Yeah,
and there was just so much fear mongering going on with this whole virus, and the CDC, and Fauci and stuff, where people, there's a lot of people that can't think for themselves,
yeah,
and just easily succumb to whatever the government was putting out, whatever news outlets were putting out on the do's and don'ts. And I think governments around the world like really learned how easy it was to control, their citizens, the general population around Earth.
right,
It was a weird time. So, yeah, you really have to be uh, an independent thinker, or just question stuff, before you arrive to what you think is the truth. And I think there's less and less of that happening, um, as we move on in life, with just the times that we're in today. There's a lot of people that just can't think for themselves. And not to go off on a tangent, but I just now reminded myself, and I have these conversations with my son, that the more you depend on technology, the less of a critical thinker you are.
mm,
Because, I mean, let's take this for an example. It may not be the best one, but this comes to mind. Like when we were younger and we were drive to places we'd never been before. We had a paper map to
yeah,
help us get there, right? And obviously we couldn't look at the paper map, the whole trip, or we would rely on someone to give us directions. You go down 410, for example, exit here, the second light, take a left. Or now it's like we just punch in the address, put it in our Google map, and then it even talks to you. It's
hmm,
gonna tell you where to go. It's just things like that. The blind monitoring, with the blind side monitoring on cars nowadays. Everybody's got it, right, where it's like, okay, if it lights up on your rear view mirror, on your side mirror, that means that there's a car there, so you can't switch lanes. Where before you'd have to kind of look there and take a quick peek back, to see, oh, can I change lanes or not? Those are all the decisions that machines are taking away from us, technology is taking
right,
away from us. And I think, and it's convenient at times, right? I mean, I no longer have to look at my blind side. This mirror is going to flash if somebody's there, make it safe or whatever, however you want to spin it. But at the same time, the negative side to that is it's taking away critical thinking skills, and it's taking decisions away from you, and it's making them for you. You know what I'm saying? So technology is not always a good thing. I've always said that, but you know, not to go on a tangent, but there's just so many things that I see where people are just doing what they're told, or they see something on social media and then they automatically run with that as the truth,
hmm.
you know, and not enough questioning.
Yeah, I call it. Well, so when I used to have conversations with my kids, when I have conversations with my kids, I'll tell them the same thing, like question everything, even question me, like within reason, right?
Sure,
Um, but also it's like this idea, and I used to have the same conversation with them, and sometimes I don't use my GPS before that very reason because it's I don't want to have to depend on it if the satellites go down, and that's a very real threat. Like
sure.
that's one of the things that we would talk about sometimes in the military. Is like, this ex adversary has the capability to take out our satellites. So where our satellites are out, then what the fuck are we gonna do? Either way, but it's like death by convenience.
There you go.
You know, like it's just like it's like boiling a frog, right? It's like slowly happening where it's taking away um our instincts on how to operate or navigate in our world,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like making a fire, something as basic as that. And you know, if shit goes out, if you don't know how to make a fire, you're gonna potentially freeze or not be able to eat or cook, whatever. And I hope we never find that. I hope we can find our equilibrium as a society and kind of get out of this tribal mentality
right.
with identity politics and stuff like that. But
Yeah, for sure with politics right
yeah,
now, it's just so polarizing. It's crazy. I mean, obviously, we're not as old as others, our parents and maybe older siblings too, where they've probably experienced more administrations than we have. Speaking of U.S. politics, but I know in my life, this is probably the most polarizing I've seen, U.S. politics be, in my lifetime anyway.
right.
Um, Older people may disagree, but it's just kind of where we're at with U.S. politics. Is It's crazy to me. It's just too polarizing.
Yeah, I mean, and I tend to try to pull on history. Granted, I didn't live then, but um our, I mean, as early as young as our country is, the Civil War and stuff like that. I try to pull on things like that, like, well, yeah, it sucks and it's more like in our face and every day because of social media and technology, but at least we're not there yet, right?
Right,
And I think that's one of the benefits of technology, that people are able to kind of be these cyber warriors and fucking talk shit online, which is also like a double-edged sword because it's bad too, because people don't do it in person, but at the same time, like it's minimizing violence to a certain extent. But at the same time, people can talk shit and get away with it and not get punched in the face or whatever, right? Um, but uh, it, people can be a lot more easily manipulated, and I think that's one of the benefits of us growing up in the generation that we did, because we didn't grow up with like this, like iPads and iPhones and computers and stuff, or the internet for
right,
that matter. So we have this kind of life before it and life after, and then like kids nowadays, they're growing up with it, so they don't know any better,
right.
and it's like the pager, right? Like, you know what I mean?
Well, back in our day, if you had a pager,
Yeah, dude.
you were the shit.
Dude,
But yeah, right.
I remember I got a blue one. I was
Hmm.
so fucking excited. I thought it was so cool, dude. I was you
The
know,
pager, I
type,
remember.
yeah,
Yeah,
but at the same time, like, what my point was that, like, if you didn't have a pager, you weren't cool, right?
right,
At the time. But for our kids, it's like if you don't have a phone, you know, and me and growing up, not growing up, but me in the military and understanding like how easily our communications can be hacked. Like, that was always a concern for my kids, right? Of not wanting them to have it, but at the same time, it's like this: how are we gonna find that balance, right? How are we gonna put lockdowns and all these things? But some things were out of my control. At the same time, it was just like many kids have kind of suffered through like cyberbullying and what have you, because it's always following them, and fucking kids are assholes, you know what I mean?
right.
Like, they say some cruel shit. And I mean, I was a kid once too, and I'm pretty sure it says some mean hateful shit, you
Yeah,
know?
I've been there, done that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But most of our stuff was, if not all our stuff, was face to face. But
Yeah.
that cyberbullying, it's real.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for kids, it's, I mean, not that adults don't succumb to that, or let it affect them, but I know kids that uh, can really be affected by that, when it comes to cyberbullying and stuff. But yeah, there's just so many things that technology brings to us that they're man-made problems, man.
Yeah.
That's what they are. They're man-made problems. Um, so, so
There,
yeah.
there's a YouTube channel I watch. It's I think it's called, and I'm probably gonna jack this up, the Mullen Brothers or Mulligan Brothers. I
Hmm.
think it's Mullen Brothers. But they do like documentaries, and they go like to there was one in particular, they went to a tribe in Africa, and they were asking them a lot of the questions that are like, kind of going around in our society today. And like they were like just dumbfounded about like just the very basis of some of these questions. But with that, it's like the programming aspect of it, and it's whether intentional or unintentional, either way, it still happens, right? That influence. But it's interesting, like how the neighborhood we grew up in, right, and how we like. I didn't know I lived in the. I mean, we used to say it, but I really didn't know until my first time I brought some military friends home for a get together. I think you were there that night too. Yeah, it was like when I was at my first base at Kelly,
Okay.
and then we're driving into the neighborhood. We drive on I think it was Allende, where uh, that taco place is. Is it not Allende?
Which taco place?
The one
There's like 500.
Orositas.
Oh, that's Amaya.
Oh yeah,
Amaya.
Maya. Oh, yeah,
Amaya
yeah, yeah.
Street. Yeah.
So as soon as we got on there, they're like, and they're from like Washington State or wherever. Like, dude, you live in the fucking ghetto, and I was like, I do. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
because I knew like
Yeah.
we grew up in like the hood, so to speak,
Yeah.
but like I always knew that there was other people like worse off than me.
Sure.
You know what I mean? I mean, relative to like our situation, but either way, that was kind of like the first time it actually drove home,
Hmm.
right? But I also carried that mentality with it, like into the military, and I put myself in a lot of precarious situations,
Like, elaborate on mentality. What mentality did you take into the
like
military?
the respect aspect of it. Like
Okay.
if I got disrespected or
Okay.
whatever, like at bars or whatever, or a look or somebody bumped me the wrong way.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So some of that street that we grew up with,
Yeah, yeah,
right? Just kind of how we were brought up and the environment we were part of. Yeah, I can definitely relate to that.
yeah.
And I also had a similar experience, right? So right after high school, uh, I had the opportunity to go to college and play some football and up in the Midwest in Iowa. So it was total culture shock for me. Went up there, but I remember coming back from for Thanksgiving, a break, and there was a kid up there that was also on a football scholarship. He was our kicker, our place kicker, and he was from Victoria, Texas. So
Mm.
I befriended him and only knew him for a couple months. Say, I'm going to drive down to Texas to Victoria. You want to hop a ride with me? We'll carpool. Um, so I do remember him dropping me off at my house, because obviously Victoria's further south. So we got to San Antonio, and when we exited General McMullen, and we got into the neighborhood. And he's a white guy, right? And he was looking around like, "What in the world?" But that was my environment. I
Yeah,
felt I was home, you know. But I remember him making some comments, and don't remember exactly what they were, but they were basically like, "Wow, this is where you're from." I'm like, yeah, this is where I'm from.
yeah,
And then to touch on the other point where it's like, I would puff up my chest up there, being one of only 5, 6 Hispanics in the entire campus.
yeah.
Uh, you know, Somebody looked at me the wrong way, or disrespecting, whatever,
Right.
even the slightest, if I would take that as disrespect, I would make it known. I wanted to, let everybody know that, that's not how I operate, or that's not what I'm used to, just because where we were from,
Yeah.
uh, and it wasn't, looking back, it wasn't necessarily a good thing,
Yeah.
um, but that's how we were raised. And it wasn't so much as how we were raised, that we were just a product of our environment, right?
Right.
I mean, that was just normal for us. It was almost like
Mhm.
survival tactic,
Yeah.
not that I was in any type of, you know grave danger, or what have you, but I wanted to make it known that I wasn't somebody that you would mess with,
Yeah.
so I can definitely relate to some of the things that you're saying in that regard. But man, Westside San Antonio, I tell you what, man, looking back, and I don't know if you have these moments, but I look back at, you know how we grew up, the things that we experienced, the things that we lived through. It's like, man, where I am today versus where I was back then. I'm surprised I even got out. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? To use that term, and you hear people talk about it all the time. Whether it be professional, athletes, about how they grew up and where they are now, and they could never. I can kind of relate to that.
Hmm.
Just some of the things that, again, that we were exposed to. And we talked about this earlier too. With my son, half kidding. He says, "Dad, nobody messes with me, and I'm from the streets." And I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, son, you have no idea.
Yeah.
You have no idea. You live out in the suburbs. You know what I mean? Uh, and no fault of his. That's just that's the experience he has, and that's the experience he gets to have. But you and I were, I mean, we grew up 2 houses apart, and our experiences are very similar.
Yeah.
So
I tell people like I've been shot at more times out of the military than in the military.
yeah,
I mean, granted, I was Air Force, but
yeah,
I mean, it's true though. I'm pretty sure we both have. Yeah, I know what bullets sound like whizzing by. I was telling this story to my friend the other day, and it's funny to me now. But one time, I don't. Uh, Chris Toscano was spending the night at the house, and my dad, my uncle was dropping. Went to go pick up my dad because he was too drunk to drive home. And as we go outside to go meet him, like in the 2207
uh-huh.
right there, um, we just start hearing like bullets, like we hear the gunshots, but you hear like the whizzing,
Hmm.
and I just automatically hit the ground, and then I told like I want to say I grabbed Chris or like told him to get down or whatever, or maybe he just did what I did. I don't remember. It happened so quick. But I'm looking at my dad as he pulls in well, he's on the passenger side. My uncle was driving him, and I'm like, Dad, get down. And like he's on the side where the bullets are coming from, and my uncle gets down, but all he did was just squat down a little bit. You could still see his head above the car. Man, it was funny because I was laughing.
Which uncle was this? Joe?
No, it was
Joe?
my Johnny Paul, my cousin Johnny Paul's his brother Frank.
It was JV's dad, Joe, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Okay. That's
yeah.
who I pictured right when you said uncle.
Nah,
But
you that yeah, 9 times out of 10 it would be my Theo Joe, but nah, it was his brother Frank, his older brother. Man, but I still laugh about it because he was just he went down, but he was like still smiling, and it was like
he was
leaves
probably
falling.
drunk too,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, he
Yeah.
was drunk, dude. But either way, but I remember kind of like laughing,
Yeah.
and but I remember looking at Chris's face, and it was like serious, and
Yeah.
I felt like it's dawned on me, like
Yeah.
fuck, like he
He was
hasn't.
traumatized.
Yeah, a little,
Yeah,
because why
sure.
wouldn't if you've never been in that
Yeah.
situation?
And I don't know if you remember this or not, Simon, because I know you're but 3, 4 years younger than I was. But I mean, again, we grew up two houses from each other. But there was a time, and this is gonna date us, but there was a time between 90 94 where in our neighborhood drive-bys were almost a weekly thing.
Yeah,
You know, because of the gangs and stuff. Uh, but I remember, I would hear gunshots like again on the weekly,
right.
and then come to find out the next day at school it was so and so's house, and they suspect that so and so did it. You
Yep.
know what I mean? And that was just the norm.
I joke about because they didn't have GPS then.
No,
They shoot the wrong house.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah,
you're right. Because I
yeah,
remember, and I'm glad you bring that up because I remember sleeping on the floor some nights, like my mom or dad or whoever, and they were like, But I remember sleeping on the floor. It wasn't like all the time, but I remember a couple nights when it got really bad. I was sleeping on the floor, and then having that understanding like of why you're sleeping on the floor, but then you're just sleeping on the floor because you were told to, but you
right,
don't really process anymore because that's just the world you're in.
right,
But yeah, it like because sometimes I think like when I tell other people like I went on a podcast and I don't know I said that thing like I've been shot more times out of the military than in the military, and I mean these guys are like rangers and like um
they see combat,
yeah they seen combat right, and we just saw it like differently right. We're growing up in our own neighborhood, and I mean, I'm not trying to say this or that, but at the same time, it's like it still affects you in the way that it does.
right,
And with that, it's like I remember them saying like, "Where'd you live at?" And I was like, "West Side San Antonio." And they're like, but I don't think a lot of people are aware of it because it's not like L.A., it's not like Watts or wherever, right,
right,
or the Compton or whatever. It's not like as publicized.
sure,
But I remember one year, and then people in the neighborhood like almost celebrating it, right? Like yeah, we're like I think we came in second or something like that in the nation for like murders or some shit. And but yeah, it was like pretty prevalent. And but yeah, that's the world we grew up in. And again, we talked about this earlier, but it's not from this place of like victimhood, but it's like, fuck, man, that's crazy. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and now I know why I look the way I look. I talk the way I respond when I respond sometimes, or at least I see the world the way I see it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or the way I should say we see. I don't want to speak for you, but yeah, because it's a relative, right? Um, and and I say that to you, it's like, well, if we are going to work on ourselves or change ourselves in any way, then we have to understand like what environment that we grew up in, and
Right.
it's looking at it from a place of just analyzing it and not like letting it succumb overtake you,
Yeah.
for lack of a better word.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a good point that you make, man. Is you talk about how you respond, over the course of the things that you've been through in your life, you know, how you respond to certain things. I don't think I necessarily have done um, a good enough job of chicken and tying. Like maybe I respond this way because of some of the things that I experienced as a kid, right? Because it's a lot when you think back, and again, to the point we've been driving, is that you didn't know any different. That was just our environment,
Right.
but it does mold you, and it does make you react certain ways. Um, and I think I probably should do a better job of trying to understand that, right? I mean, I don't want to call it childhood trauma because I'm in one piece, and uh, thankfully I made it out. But um, it'd be interesting to have a conversation to see some of the things that I remember experiencing, whether that's with family or just the neighborhood and the people that we grew up with, um, on being able to tick and tie that and see if there's any connection between why I respond to certain things certain ways.
Yeah.
But but yeah, man, we talked about this earlier, right? We used to play tackle football, in a vacant house lawn, and we'd run into used syringes, and
Yeah.
drug paraphernalia, and it's just crazy. It was just we'd kick it aside, or we'd canvass the grass to make sure there wasn't anything else or any other syringes, and then we'd keep playing. But it was crazy.
Yeah. And uh, so I hesitate, or I don't want to say I push back, but at least I'll just highlight, um, because I think there's been a lot of people that kind of talk about like trauma, right?
Right.
And and on some level, it could. I think there's been a lot of people that kind of don't do it justice and they overuse it. You know what I mean? Like it's like when kids say like I have anxiety, but it's like there that anxiety is on a spectrum, right?
Sure.
And like there could be debilitating anxiety, and then there's just anxiety, right? You're nervous before a test. That's a level of anxiety, right? It's a healthy amount of anxiety. Or if you're going to a situation you're unaware of, right? That's a healthy level of anxiety. But excuse me, trauma is trauma, and like, and it's not from the standpoint. And I'm not trying to put anything on you
No, you're good.
in general, but just generally speaking, the way that it kind of kind of sets your worldview in that in those moments of it happening, that's like trauma. That's like that. It's like cutting the connection, or that. I mean, whether it affects you to the point where it debilitates you, where you can't go to work and stuff like that. I mean, that's like on the spectrum of trauma, right?
Sure.
But but yeah, it does it does affect each of us to a certain extent, right? And it does like affect the way we make our decisions and the way we kind of carry ourselves in life, right? And I'm not trying to put anything on you, but I just feel like I have to highlight that because what we end up doing, especially in the military and just in general, we compare ourselves to other people and like, well, I didn't have it as bad as that guy, so I'm good, right? Or that, you know what I mean?
Right.
But at the end of the day, our journey is our journey, and I feel like it's important that we understand these things, and so that way we can, because I feel like trauma and like stress and all these things that happen in our lives will stay there and they'll manifest themselves in other ways.
Yeah.
Like whether like that stress can turn into, knock on wood, I'm not trying to put this on you, but
Sure.
just in general, it can turn into cancer. It can
Sure.
turn into, I don't know, like back pain. It can there's different ways that trauma and pain and stress, or trauma and stress, can manifest itself in your life in different in various ways. And there's been like a number of studies that or cases I should say, where people either underwent like a psychedelic treatment or they went through some type of therapy or something, or acupuncture or what have you. And when they process a certain thing in their childhood or whatever happened, that certain pains and ailments alleviate themselves from their life, because the body, there's a book that says the body keeps a score.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't read it, but I reference it often because I've listened to people talk about it, like people smarter than me. And but your body does trap that memory in there, and if we don't deal with it, it's gonna, it'll stay there. And oftentimes with me personally, it would happen when I would drink. I would react a certain way. Sometimes I'd overreact, especially like if anything having to do with safety. That and the military reinforced those things. Whenever I kind of lost my shit, it was like, and I didn't understand that why I was doing it then, but like if my kids were doing something and it was like something safety wise, or like I remember one time I wasn't even drinking, but we went downtown. Uh I think it was like something at the Alamo Dome. And this is after I got out of the military and I was still going through whatever. Uh and there was a car, like looking back on it, it's kind of embarrassing, right? But it was like probably like a mile down the street. But it was like it revved its engine and it was starting to haul ass. And they had plenty of time to cross.
Sure.
But they were taking their time. It was my nephews, my nieces, and my kids. And they were taking their time, like lollygagging and laughing and not even aware that this was a. But I saw it and I was trying to tell them to hurry up. And they weren't hurrying up, man. And then I reacted and I was like, I don't know what I said. I might have said a couple of curse words, but like to for them to understand my sense of urgency, right? Because I was, and I didn't understand at the time, and I just drove home by myself. My wife took my kids and my nieces and took them home, and I just drove by myself. And but I had this fucking anger, dude, like because, and I didn't understand what it was. It was just this ball of anger and like fucking pissed because I was like, and then after a while I understood like it's because I was so concerned and like maybe things that kind of reinforce that in the military, like something like I was just like, I need to get him out of this situation in a hurry. And I noticed that when I was in Boston too, when I was taking you guys around, I never wanted to stay in one place too long. When I take family around, like I always had to keep moving. And it was just like this, I don't know, this fear of something happening that I had to keep moving. Even airports, anywhere I went, I still didn't sleep in airplanes and stuff like that. But it's just like this number of things that have happened and I'm still trying to unfold and unlock to understand like why I'm that way. Because even when it happens now, I still kind of, but I catch myself now.
Wow.
I'm like more aware of it. I'm like, all right, okay, well, let me tie that back to something. And
Yeah.
the more you practice it, the better you get at catching and reacting and being more um I don't, you're just not as reactive.
Sure.
And then cutting alcohol out helped me with that as also.
Wow. I mean, I'm listening to you talk about that, and I'm just, my mind starts working, and I can think of a handful of times where, to your point, with your nephews and nieces crossing the street, and to most you were probably overreacting, but to you felt like they were in imminent danger,
Right.
right? But I've had reactions like that too. Like I said, I can think of a handful of things, and I often wonder like why I react the way I react, because you think back, right? You kind of remove yourself from the situation and you start kind of replaying it in your head, and you're starting to think to yourself like, well, maybe I shouldn't have reacted that way. Maybe it wasn't that bad of a scenario or whatever. Yeah, and some of it you can kind of, chalk up to being a protective dad or husband or whatever, because you don't want anything bad to happen to your loved ones. But, oftentimes I have overreacted, just from a protective
Mm-hmm.
in a protective way. Um, whether it's, in your case, a car that's driving too fast, you don't want anything to happen to the kids, or um, my son just recently started driving, and I'm like always looking up his location and making sure he got there safely. And sometimes like, Dad, you need to back up. I'm good. I know what I'm doing, type stuff. And but it'd be interesting to see if I could tick and tie to maybe why I react that way. If it's got to do with something I dealt with in the past, and then maybe even reference that book that you mentioned, and pick it up and read and
Yeah.
help it make sense. Because too, and we talked about this prior to coming on here about some of the health scares that I've had, or some of the lingering aches and pains that I've experienced, and I go see medical professionals and they can't explain it. And then
Yeah.
what do you end up doing? You end up medicating and trying to uh, treat it that way,
Hmm.
which oftentimes it's not the route to go. But um, you bring up some interesting points. I probably need to learn more about that to help me understand better what's going on with my body, or when it does. Or um, but yeah, man, childhood trauma is a thing I'm starting to learn.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
And it wasn't a thing that was allowed to be brought up when we were younger. And
no,
even now, like if your parents, like if my mom was still alive, I mean maybe she would understand it now because she went through her own stuff. But like even in our culture, like it's real easy. Like just the first person I think of, like yeah, he's funny and stuff, but I think he also does a disservice. I mean, he's a comedian, so I'll just put that. But like George Lopez is one of them. Right? Like, why are you crying and stuff?
yeah,
But I mean, it's true that he does highlight like something that's very funny and prevalent, and maybe that's his point. And maybe I'm not giving him this justice in his comedy, but at the same time, a lot of people like they have these adopted ideas and like they learn it from. Like I remember I used to tell my wife like, and I was proud of it when I used to say it. It's stupid when I say it now, and it's embarrassing to say. But I used to say like, if anyone made me quit drinking, I'd fucking leave them. And I was like, where the fuck did I get that? It doesn't make any sense. I get it. I get it. But I used to say that because I was like, this is the one thing that I do, and this is the one thing I'm always gonna do, regardless of. And if anybody tries to make me stop, then I'm not gonna be with them. And it's not doesn't make sense, and it's kind of dumb to say, but at the same time, that's what I thought. But I don't know where I adopted that idea from, and that's what I'm going with. Is like as kids and stuff, like we are not uh, we look up to people, whether in the neighborhood, in the family, or like the cool tios or whatever. And we,
Theo Joe.
yeah, yeah, Theo Joe. I don't think he ever said that though. But either way, like I think I don't want to say his name, but like it was one of my, I think my, someone we brought up earlier. Um, but he used to say that I want to say, and I want to say that's where I got that adopted idea. And but either way, like it's still on me, like the accountability. Like I still said it. I still said it with the conviction. But fast forward, like my point is that we end up living our lives whether by somebody else's like
Rules, or
rules or yeah, like the more common one, right? When you get grow up, you can become a doctor, lawyer,
yeah,
get a house with a picket fence or whatever, right?
yeah,
Whatever that's and people will attain that, and then they get there like, why the fuck am I not happy? I have all these things,
right,
but they're not your things. They're it's not what's meant for you. It's not. It's you got it for because somebody else said you should have it.
yeah, yeah. They try to impress that upon you, right?
Right.
And the only way you're gonna be happy is if you have money, you have a good career, uh, and to your point, lawyer, doctor, etc. All these, careers that can prove to be, make you wealthy and professional, well respected, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then two, going back to what you mentioned, yeah, there was a little bit of machismo in there, right? And
Yeah.
how, the male figures in our life, kind of the way they would speak, the way they would behave, impressed upon you, like, well, that's the way I need to be. And then going back to the drinking problem, or I don't want to call it a problem, but you had a dependency.
Mm-hmm.
You had a dependency with that, and at the time that where your mind was at with the alcohol, and I'm not going to give it up. Nobody can make me give it up.
Right.
This is what makes me happy. This is what takes the pain away, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think I've had a problem with alcohol. I mean, and we talked prior to coming on, we talked about, I went through a spell with, being dependent on a substance.
Right.
Um, and at the time, I didn't see anything wrong with it. It was helping me work through, my health issues, my anxiety and depression, everything that came with the health scare. But that was the way I was uh, able to get by. And at the time, although I didn't verbalize it, but if you know, I know I was thinking it, like I needed this.
Yeah.
I needed this medication. And I couldn't survive without this medication. It helped me get through, every day.
Yeah.
It helped me get through my day, and I needed it. And if anybody suggested that I needed to give it up, I probably would have had that same mentality where like, no, I'm not. No, no, you're not going to make me give this up. Don't
Right.
you understand? I need this. This is what makes me feel better,
Mm.
right? Um, so man, yeah, there's going back to this all ties back to childhood and the things that our culture impresses upon us, kind of makes us want to pursue that or live that when it's not always the best advice or the best guidance that our parents were giving us or whoever the adult was at the time. And I've tried to impress upon my kid, and I think because I know you asked me earlier, what's taking up most of your time? For me, it's been being a parent, right? I've got a 16-year-old kid, 16-year-old boy at home, and I've always tried to impress upon him positive stuff, right?
Right.
Some of the things that I grew up with that I consider, good stuff, having a good work ethic, etc., being respectful, being nice to people, it doesn't cost you a thing. That type of stuff I try to impress upon him, but uh, definitely try to raise him in a different way. Just because, as an adult, obviously I've experienced more, and I know what life is about and what characteristics I need to instill in him or try to develop in him to make him successful, to find his happy, right?
Right.
But yeah, it's interesting how we grew up and how we're here.
Yeah.
We've survived
Yeah.
up until this point, right? Just because, but at the same time, right? I'm blessed. I my parents and I lost my dad when I was 6, but my mom really played both roles for me. You know, um, after 6 years old, so she was my mom and my dad, but yeah, she impressed upon me a lot of good things, and I know she tried to give me the best life that she could, right? Um, Even though we weren't in the best neighborhood or in the safest neighborhood, um, but I'm blessed, man, because it molded me into what I am today, right? And
Yeah.
those life experiences you try to prevent your kids from having, you know, um, and sometimes to a fault, right? I've been guilty, probably not a whole lot, but I've been guilty of coddling a bit, um, but for the most part, I've wanted my kids to have a better life and a better upbringing, um, than what I had.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And yeah. And by no means do I am I, and I don't think you take it this way, but just for anybody listening, like I'm not trying to say uh like how dare our parents for doing this or not providing this or whatever. Like I've gotten to the point in my life where I can look back at my life and like all the even tragic things that happened.
sure,
I'm appreciative for them, right? Yeah, it sucked at the time, and I'll continue to probably have more as I grow older. And I'll try to remember this as I say this right now. But I feel like all those that suffering, if you will, has
yeah,
shaped us and molded us and made us resilient in the ways that it has.
that's a good word, resilient for
Yeah.
sure.
Um, because if those things weren't there, like if we didn't have that suffering or that resistance, um, then we wouldn't be able to sustain a lot of things that are kind of coming our way or prepare us for like life and what have you. I mean, you could, uh, and and I try to do the same too, to an extent, like coddle my kids and protect them and stuff, and make them aware of these things. But sometimes I'm like, maybe I'm like giving you too much information at this age, and there's definitely a balance to what I'm sharing with you. I remember having a conversation at the table with my kids, and they're probably like 7 or 8, and I'm talking to them about like being aware of, you know, people potentially trying to like, kidnap them or trying to
Stranger danger.
stranger danger kind of
Yeah, yeah.
thing, and I'm just pulling all these experiences or what have you, and I'm just like, but I remember the look on their face, and they're like scared, and I was like, and then I started to dial it back. But either way, like that's something my mom used to do to me, is she would like tell us every, like, like tell me all kinds of things to be aware of, even so much so she made, when I got my license, she made me remember my driver license number. But it was all these things, right? And with good cause, right? She came from a different world, some different life experiences. But I'm grateful, I mean, for all the things that happened, even like the stuff that, I experienced just within our own home, right? Um, and it makes me helps me appreciate her more, that I went through what I went through.
Hmm.
Um, and to some extent, I'm a little saddened because I didn't have these tools to help her then. But at the same time, one big thing I took away from that experience, along with many other experiences that I've had, is that uh, one, like not everyone wants to be helped, and two, um, the person has to be willing to make the changes.
Yeah, for
If
sure.
not, the shit ain't gonna take.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you know, talking about our experiences and our parents, the things that you went through. Obviously, we grew up together. I'm intimately familiar with all of your family. They were like family and still are to me. So I know the history. I knew some of the events that happened in your family uh, with your parents. Um, I don't think I don't think any parent chooses to be a bad parent,
Right.
or um, I think they always have good intent. They basically, what I'm trying to say is they tried their best,
Yeah.
right? Same thing with my mom. She was obviously not prepared to be, a single mom with 4 kids, and the 6-year-old being the youngest, 15 or 16-year-old being the oldest, and having to raise those 4 kids on her own. Was it always happy go lucky? No. There was some struggles along the way, but she tried her best.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful. I'm grateful. And I think, going back to losing my dad at 6 years old, I think if that doesn't happen to me, I'm probably not the dad I am today, because I use that as motivation, if you will, to say, to make a conscious effort to be a great dad, because I didn't grow up with one. You know what I'm saying? So, all the time and the effort I put into my kids, I think I can tie that back to losing my dad at a very young age, and not having the experience, the father son experience growing up. You
Hmm.
know, um, picking up a baseball and teaching me about sports, or teaching me how to work on a car. I didn't have any of those experiences, and those are some of the things that I do almost on the daily with my son. But
Hmm.
it's that I can directly tie back to not having my father around, growing up. Um, but yeah, I think our parents obviously tried their best. Was every day a good day? No, right? I
Yeah.
mean, they all had their hiccups, and I'm sure that if they could, they would take it back, because they didn't know how that would affect their kid. You know, even
Yeah.
even to the present day. So
Yeah. You hit on a lot of good points, and um, one of the things I tell my, like, I was telling my sister this the other day. It's like, and even my nephews, like, with my kids, I'm like trying to give them the cliff notes to life, right?
yep,
And I used to get, I mean, obviously they look at you, right, like kind of deer in the headlights, like, what are you talking about? And then it occurred to me after some time of thinking, it was like, man, I'm trying to give them the keys to doors they haven't found yet,
right,
because they don't have the life experience to understand. So I'm giving them all these keys, and like, hey, like, this one, when you get to this one or whatever. But and then I used to get frustrated because they weren't like appreciating what I'm trying to tell them.
I've been there, done that,
And
sir.
so
Yep.
yeah, but at the same time, it clicked. I'm like, they don't know any better.
That's right.
Like so when something happened like about 4 years ago, um, with my son, just right afterwards, I called my dad and I was like, hey, it's like whatever I've done in the past that hurt you or pissed you off, or you know, if I didn't call you or whatever, like I'm sorry,
Yep.
you
Yep.
know. And what I said it right, like genuinely said it, and but what I didn't expect was for him to reciprocate that.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was like, and I caught him off guard, right?
Sure.
Because I was driving to Oregon, and but yeah, like so that's something I didn't expect to hear. But since then, like I can just talk to him like I'm not talking to him like yeah, he's my dad, but I talk to him
It's man to man.
man to man. Like I ask him, I'm like, hey, so what was Prague like? Like what was that experience like? You know what I mean? And I can
Mm-hmm.
kind of get in the nuances of it, and that's something I didn't expect either. You know what I mean? But I told him like like man, I get it. Like I get why you used to have a beer every night. One, you fucking did roofing right in Texas,
Yeah.
fucking hot as balls
Yep.
every day. Two, you're coming home to a house of six kids. I could barely manage. You know what I mean? Have
Right.
being around kids, right? Three, it's my mom always had you fucking building a new room or something, right?
Yeah.
It was like the Winchester house.
Yeah, I mean, take it a step further. I mean, say the truth. You're adding a whole new story.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it wasn't just a room; it was a whole new
Dude,
story, to
yeah.
the house. Yeah,
I joke with him. I was like, you had to go to work to get vacation.
yeah,
Like, so,
yeah.
I mean, on top of that, like my mom's like stuff too, like, childhood
Sure,
traumas, losing her dad to suicide and um, like being sexually assaulted, all these things. Like, and that's not to factor in like all the kids
yeah.
and
And her having a full
health
time job
scares,
too.
full-time job.
And most times it was over 40 hours.
Yep. Back
Um,
surgeries. She had 3 or 4 back
yeah,
surgeries, and then like
yeah,
the ignorance, and I don't see that in a negative way, but the trust that we put in our medical physicians and
right.
not asking like the side effects
Of certain
of
things.
certain things, and then those things consume you.
Yeah,
And but yeah, I mean, I say that with full understanding and appreciation, and like fuck, I get it. I don't know if I would have been as strong as y'all to deal with all the shit that we fucking threw at y'all.
yeah, yeah. And to kind of touch on one of the points that you made, making that phone call to your parents, right? Or in this case to your dad. Um and then your kids not having full appreciation or even understanding of what it is that you're trying to teach them
Hmm.
or give them the answers to, right? Because to your point, they're not there yet. They're just not experienced enough, or they just don't know. But going back, we were the same way,
Yeah,
right? Ignorance is bliss, or your youth is your youth, and you're oblivious to so many things because you don't know any better, and you don't appreciate your parents in that given time. But then you move on, right? You get older, and it was good that you had that moment with your dad. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? To say, hey man, I, I get it. I know what you went through, or at least understand what you went through. Scenario's probably different, right?
right.
But but yeah, that's so real, man. That's heavy. It really is heavy because obviously I lost my mom at 22 years old. So both my parents were gone by the time I was 22. I never got to have that conversation, but I can tell you I've had that moment, that thought 100 times, probably even more, to say, man, my mom was right, or gee, thanks mom, because I remember you telling me
Hmm.
this or that, giving me this life lesson or that life lesson, and here it played out, and I kind of knew what to do with it. um but at the time, I didn't appreciate it, right? But if I could go back in time and say, hey mom, I'm sorry for whatever I did, because my kids put me through some stuff, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
and I'm sorry, because I remember she did have a saying. I don't remember exactly. I'm probably gonna butcher this, but it was something like, and of course it was in Spanish, and it was like, whatever you do to me, your kids are gonna do 10 times worse to you. And I have to say, that's kind of played out to be to be
Yeah.
true, you know. But yeah, man, our parents, they did their best. And uh, but yeah, your dad doing roofs in Texas. I remember him at home in the front porch, smoking a cigarette and drinking a beer.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, and then your mom working for, was it Via?
Yeah.
Yeah, working for Via. I mean, that's a tough job,
Yeah.
having to deal with people and just driving around. And they were always doing more than 40 hours.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, man. Uh, Old school, strong-willed, strong work ethic,
Yeah.
people. Um, so, but, yeah.
Yeah. And so on the other side of that, like it's yeah, and it's just if they could yeah, like I'm completely like grateful for them and all the life lessons they taught me both intentionally and unintentionally. Because I do feel like I told you a lot earlier, like, and it took me a while to understand this concept, but and I feel like that's one of my, and I found I sound strange saying it, but I'm kind of moving into this confidence of like I share like what I know about my experiences, and I kind of just fucking throw it on the table. I'm like, hey man, if any of this shit could help you, have at it. You know what I mean? Like, and I sometimes wonder uh, if I overshare too much, but at the same time, I feel like that's my purpose, right? Of me being on all the bullshit that I've been through, all the shit that I put myself through, all the stuff, all the experience that I've had, and like and I say this with a complete awareness and understanding that I am not saying that I've experienced the worst of anyone, but I do feel like I can express it in such a way that it's going to speak to that one person, whoever that is, and if they could find themselves in the fucking chaos of whatever I'm sharing, and like, oh man, I didn't think of it that way. Oh man, I didn't think like, or if they came from where he came from, and be like, oh, I don't have to live this way. I don't have to follow this path. Oh, there is another way out, and it's like it's like they say like there's more than one route to the top of the mountain. I'm
That's
probably
right.
fucking that up, but at the end of the day, that's what it is, and it's yes, our culture. There's a lot of good in it, right? And there's a lot of good times, and there's a lot of like community and stuff like that. But sometimes some of the ways we do it is not conducive, and it ends up kind of playing out in not ways that we expect. Because I remember in some of the relationships that I was in, I unintentionally sought those relationships because I felt that that was the right type of person for me,
Mm-hmm.
right? And a lot of times, because I felt like the passion that they were showing meant that they loved me, not understanding like, hey, this is probably not healthy, right?
Right.
The way that this is playing out, the way like being chased or whatever, right, is not conducive and not healthy for anyone in any relationship, right? And I'm not saying that I was perfect in those relationships either. I had my own shit to work on that I was acting out in the ways these adopted ideas or what I thought a man should be or like carry themselves, and then alcohol factored in and whatever else, right? And then this false confidence that I used to carry, right? Like, that I like that I it served me in the neighborhood, but it didn't serve me like anywhere else, right? And so like coming to the awareness and understanding, like, and like really looking at myself and like, fuck, like like this sucks because now I'm aware of it. Now I feel a responsibility and accountability to change the way I am, because I don't want to have these I don't want my kids to I want them to get the best version of myself, or my nephews, or nieces or whatever,
Yeah.
and be that I don't want to say better role model, but just a different option for them to potentially portray. At least, at the very least, ask questions. Like,
Right.
you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, and it takes a lot. I mean, to be introspective and to come to the realization that, hey, maybe the way I was living is not the best, right? Um, Even factoring in relationships, right? And becoming aware of, having to step back and say, hey, is this the best? Is this the life I want to lead? And sometimes there's kids involved too, right? And you have to make those hard decisions to say, hey, maybe it's best that I get out of this marriage or get out of this relationship to better myself, to become a better version of myself, or just to work on me. You know what I mean? And then the final, I don't think we'll ever be a final product, right? But because we're always trying to evolve and do better. But um, all the different people that you could potentially impact, whether it be nieces, nephews, you know, uncles. In my case, I'm very involved with youth sports, right? They're not youth. I mean, they're already in high school, but I mean, I guess it's relative. But uh, I try to impress upon them, you know, good. Um, how can I put this? I just try to be a good example for them and try to, you know, my message is always positive for them. And I try to influence people that way.
Mm-hmm.
But using the uncle nephew dynamic, I've got a nephew who's in his mid 30s. He's a father, 5 6 year old nephew that I have, a grandnephew. I don't know what they're considered, what the term is, but I know I try to make a concentrated effort to be there for my nephew and I guess in a way my grandnephew to be there because his relationship with his father is not the best, but um, I can definitely relate that we need to be the best that we can be, for them, right? And to give them, offer them different perspectives, offer them different advice, different opinions than what maybe they're getting somewhere else. So I definitely feel that responsibility as I've gotten older, right? And not to preach, but um, that that in itself gives you purpose,
Right.
right? Because we know we can't go back with whatever, however we were or whatever we were going through 15, 20, 30 years from now and want to do things differently. You can't. The past is the past, and you've got to look for what's ahead of you. Not to sound too cliche or corny, but um, how can I make a positive impact to the people that mean the most to me, and allow them to maybe avoid some of the pitfalls that
Yeah.
I experienced.
Yeah. And I think because and those are all like valid points because I, I mean, you know me, you've known me for a long time, and I feel like naturally I'm an introvert. But when I made this decision to kind of be so public with my story and stuff, it was like on the heels of like one, obviously me having an attempt on my own life, but two, like friends doing it, right? And then it's like, fuck, like in the military, they talk about being a leader, right? And then there's different types of leaders, right? And it's like, this is gonna suck. This is being vulnerable. This is kind of being easy to being like picked at, right, by people because it's easy to tear people down,
Sure.
right? But I had to just kind of like squash all that and be like, fuck it, this is what it is. And I feel like because you could do like, and I'm not trying to knock any other awareness campaign that is out there for suicide awareness, right? But that only does so much. You can only do so many push-ups, and you can only, and unfortunately, human nature, right? It's on to the next thing, right? It's on the next thing, like so. It's like how how can you create change? How can you raise awareness differently? And it's like the only way to do that is to talk about it, right? To talk about it from a standpoint like this is what it was. Like, am I proud about it? Probably not. It's how come I ignored all the flags to get to that one point, right? Like it was always like making excuses or rationalizing this or that, right? But at the same time, it's like I feel like I have a responsibility to an extent, like to be open about it, right? And talk about it because one, it's not in our culture to talk about it. Like anytime our parents bought it, they would you see like the loony bin or
Hmm.
they would say this or that. And two was also to take away the power from people that could potentially use it against me in the future, right?
Right.
But it was also like, all right, well, I still got friends taking their lives, and how can I, in what ways can I do this to make a positive impact? And I knew no other way other than like a podcast, right? Or talking about social media. Maybe I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. Still don't. I'm still figuring shit out, right?
Right.
Like the lighting, probably somebody's gonna be like, "Oh man, look at this lighting, it's shit." You know what I mean? But I don't know what I'm doing, right? But at the same time, like I'm still trying to figure it out.
Sure.
And potentially, in probably some of my social media posts, I've probably overshared or whatever, or like the way I do it, or maybe it's not as trendy or whatever the fuck. I don't know. I just know how to be me, right?
Right.
And with that, it's like if like kind of going back to before we started, maybe it was on the podcast. If you can affect that one person, right, and like, and it's not going to be for everyone, right? This podcast is not for everyone, um, but it's for the people that are willing to like aware, like, hey man, there's something fucking going on, right? And I don't know what it is, but if one of the things that helped me when I was in the hospital, when I was an inpatient, was, and it sounds cliche, and if somebody would have told me before, I probably still would have had listened. But it was like, you're not the only one going through this, and like to actually be in a room with other vets that are going through something like different experiences, um, but at the same time, these experiences all um, resulted in the same symptoms, right? And that's something to be connected on. Is like it's not the experiences, because we can compare all day, and then a lot of times comparison. Um, what did I say the other day? Like the thief of, I mean, I kind of like fucking remix this, but the thief of joy is comparison.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's
Yeah.
like, yes, so and so was doing this, and they had, but I found that even people that are on the front lines kicking fucking doors in, they even will compare themselves to others. Like, hey, so and so had it worse. I don't deserve this. So and so had it worse, or so and so died. I don't deserve this. You know what I mean?
Right.
And we can do that all day, and that happens to a lot of guys that were not on the front line because of whatever reasons, right? And then there's a whole nother aspect of technology that is affecting a lot of people, and that's drones, people that fly UAVs.
Sure.
And that's a whole different thing that's not talked about often. I've heard it recently, but it's not as talked about as how it's happening like every day, right?
Right.
Because, and then there's that infighting with vets too, that are, some people don't completely understand it, right? And but there's this guilt that comes along with killing somebody, like not like a man, right, or whatever. Like you're killing from a remote view and somebody you really don't know, and you're doing it in such a way that's just like it's not even fair. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and they had no idea that it was
They had
coming.
no fucking idea it's
They were just going
coming,
about their
and
day.
so until it's not always right. Um,
Well, so not to interrupt,
you're good, man.
but
Please
I
do.
would tell you just to touch on a couple points. One, I'm glad you're still with us. All right. I don't know the extent of the stuff that you went through. I mean, obviously, I know that you served for our country. Thank you for your service. Um, I don't know a lot of the details of the things that you did while you were in the military, but obviously, you went through some stuff, right? Um, but you talk about how your audience, however big or small that is, if you can touch one or two individuals, if your message can help them, if they're going through something, and help them understand what it is that they're going through and probably prevent them from, in this case, taking their lives, right? Then you've done your job, right? If you can reach that one individual or two, however many it is. But the other thing too that you need to understand is you started this podcast to talk through some of your struggles, right? And that in itself is a good thing, right? Because that's helping you
Mm,
continue to cope through, you know, the things that you're going through or went through. And so if this makes you feel better, then you keep going,
yeah.
you know, you keep going, you keep doing this, and uh, for yourself. And then if you get to help others, that's a bonus.
Right.
And I know that you are, because I know that you get your views, however little or big that may be. But there's individuals out there that are listening. Um, and then with your dirt bike project too, I'm sure you're touching lots of veterans there. That network, I'm sure, is for some people what they look forward to, right? And enjoy, and you're helping veterans through that avenue as well, right? So keep doing what you're doing, man. And if this helps you, then keep going.
Yeah.
This podcast helps you do what you do and continue to be here, then keep going. More power to you, brother.
Yeah, man. I appreciate that. And I don't just like, I'm not touching them, you know what I mean? Just for like, you're talking about dirt therapy. I was like, I'm not going on touching veterans.
No,
I'm
no,
not,
you're
I'm just fucking with it.
yeah,
Yeah.
no physical touch, but you're touching them emotionally, and
Yeah,
that's a
yeah.
that's a support group there. You know what I mean? And the work that that you're doing there is big, and it's impactful.
Yeah.
And I know that nonprofits are we talked about this. Sometimes they're hard to keep afloat. So the time that you spend, and even coming out of your own pocket at times to keep it afloat. There's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah.
I admire you for that.
I mean,
So
there's been a, yeah, so it's wild. So two things. Like, one, thanks for saying that. Two, it's the dirt therapy project has been so key to me, and it came at a time, and I felt I can reverse into it.
right,
Right, I bought a bike, didn't want anything to do with the military, and I just a buddy of mine who just passed away last year, we raffled off his bike, um, and thank you for buying tickets for that. But he invited me to the first ever like ride in Arkansas, like I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. But that was from that point on, like this program has done so much for my wife and I that I didn't. It was like it was a godsend, if you will. And I don't think I say that lightly. Um, but with that, yeah, it's when we ride, we're out there, we're hanging out, like the community, the tribe, if you will. And we're kind of like the camaraderie and everything else. Even when we do group rides here, like even with non-vets and stuff like that, it's a good time. But with that, it does bring purpose and it does bring healing in these conversations that we have. But another thing I wanted to highlight is one of the things I identified was it wasn't just, and I'm finding this with a lot of vets. It's it's not just the military traumas that, like, it's easy to kind of just pull from those, right, and be like, well, this is the one thing. But the more you pull the thread, the more like everything from childhood to now is part of it. And if some of those things didn't happen then, and it's because, like we talked about earlier, if you don't deal with that stuff, like, or at least understand it or become aware of it or process it, it's gonna stay waiting for you, and it's gonna come out at the most inopportune time. You know what I mean? Like, because it's always there. It's always there, lingering, and it's waiting for you. And I'm not trying to say it in the nefarious standpoint, but it just is. It's just like it's that energy that's
yeah,
hasn't been discharged, and it'll come out like, I don't know, like, and in the most inopportune time, like, I don't know, like, move the car, like, fuck, man, we gotta move the fucking car right
man, I
now.
can relate.
You know what I
I
mean?
can
And
relate.
it's just like, it's not really about the car. It's just because your mind's constantly running and you're constantly pushing back on the back burner, right? And it's just like, I'm put in the closet, put in the closet, put in the closet. So one day you open that closet, or like, and it fucking falls out, right? And it could happen in the way of many different ways. I mean, it's the gambit. It's like Russian roulette, right? Um, and that's why I think, I mean, talk therapy is not for everyone. There's many different ways, whether it's riding a mountain bike, whether it's playing music, whether it's drawing, whether it's like finding these other outlets, right?
Right,
Um, and on top of that, it's also like another thing that has been key for me in um, shining the light in a different way, or in highlighting the things that have happened in my life differently, was psychedelics. That's not for everyone. I say that because if anybody, I have to say this because if anybody has any psychosis or bipolar, anything like that, that's not good, because it can bring on something called a narcissistic, um, spiritual narcissism, where they feel like they are God or like
Wow.
they're like the one or whatever, right? And you have to have this definitely grounded understanding of and respect for it, right? And then go in with the right intent. I think if you're like just going there to be a tourist and get fucked up, you're gonna get what you can put into it. Right? Get out what you put into it. So I feel like in the right set and setting and doing it ceremonially with the right, like I don't know, like I want to understand these things or whatever, and kind of going in and like do the right things prior to it and staying away from the things they ask you to stay away from and do it right. Uh, it can be huge, um, and this detaching your ego from because your ego protects you at the same time it keeps you from a lot of these things because we start to either compare or we start to push away or we start to think like nah it's not there it didn't affect me in that way or whatever but it takes you in this like almost like 10,000 foot view and just kind of like cycles. I mean, more specifically, each psychedelic is different and they're not for everyone, right? They say let the medicine find you, right? But I do feel like ancestrally, like um in our genes and like the way like whether it was like Native Americans or Mayans or Aztecas or whatever, that was part of the process. And I'm reading a book right now called uh The Immortality Key. It's by Brian Musgrove. Musgrove. I'm jacking up his last name, but it's talking about studying ancient relics and swabbing the ancient artifacts and finding like these psychedelic compounds
Hmm.
and these chalices from like I don't know, like 500 BC, like ancient Rome, Eleusinian mysteries and stuff. Not ancient Rome, ancient Greece. Eleusinian mysteries and how that was integrated into religion back then, but then at some point it was taken out. Either way, my point is there are medicines that can help, and I've one thing I take away from a book, another book I read, it was about ayahuasca. Is the difference between a medicine and a poison is a dosage. So is that right? Medicine and a poison is a dosage. Yeah. So some people would be like, I don't know, this beer is like my medicine, but if it's like a case later, then it's like, well, it's probably not good for you. Or food, right?
Yeah.
People have a poor relationship with food.
Right.
You know, like I notice I stress eat, and I noticed that because I was fucking like watching I don't know, a stressful movie, and I'll get up and go to the kitchen and I grab some chips or something. And I notice anytime I get stressed that I start wanting like food. So it's just like understanding these relationships we have with whatever substance it is. And it could be many different things, porn, all kinds of different things. Like I think temptation is um the spirit of temptation is prevalent in many things and
Oh, for sure.
each person is different.
Yep. 100%, man. Yeah, you bring up some good points there. Um, I'm gonna have to when this is over, I'm gonna have to write down a couple of those titles and
Yeah.
authors of the books that you mentioned because um, let's dig into some of that stuff just a little deeper. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I read I read the biography of recently here. I just finished the book Scar Tissue, Anthony Kiedis, the Red Hot Chili Peppers
Mm-hmm.
lead singer, and reading his autobiography was pretty interesting because he growing up he went through some childhood trauma like we all do, right? But he turned to some hardcore stuff to help him cope through some of that stuff, and then obviously even after he got famous he was still dependent on some of those substances, and then eventually kicked the habit. But um, so it's basically all I'm saying is I have time now to pick up another book. So
Yeah.
maybe I dive into one of those.
Yeah, man. I'll give you yeah, I'll let you know which titles they are and that's why I didn't always read. It was very difficult for me to like to stay concentrated on certain
Same.
things. So I learned that reading's a skill, not to say that, but like retention and practicing
Yep.
and it becomes easier. I thought it was just I mean, I do still have problems with concentration, right? But and what I learned is to make it work for me. So I read like a bunch of different books at once.
Really?
Well, not like at the same time,
No, no,
but
no.
yeah,
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 but
yeah.
you'll put this one down, and next time you pick up,
Yeah,
you'll pick up another one, and
exactly.
yeah,
Like I'm reading it takes me a while to read books. I feel bad I borrowed somebody lent me that book right there. And that talks about it's Homo Do, and it's talking about the change of like it's like there's a very it's a very what's a reductionist concept. So it's like humanist or animalist. So
Hmm.
we're like this separate, where the religion talks about like we're this separate entity and special, right? Humans, or we're animalists. We're like we're animals and we're part of everything, right? But either way, I've had that book for a while and I feel bad. I want to message the guy because if you go to my room, like I got like probably like 10 or 12 books on it and I just pick them up. And it's funny how some of the books I pick out, like they end up like not want to say contradicting each other, but they challenge each other. So it makes it even more challenging, right? Especially like when I read something like the Bible, right? And I'm just like, whoa. And then I read this other idea and I'm just like, and then it's like trying to pull on that discernment, right? Because I do feel like things have happened to me in my life that something has spoke to me and told me something, right? Like stay away from this. Whether I thought it was my mom or maybe the Holy Spirit, whatever, like different. But there are things that happen to me that I cannot deny, right? And there also are things that have happened to me that I still hold on to, like God and Jesus and stuff like that, because there have times where I've been in a room and something's in the room, dude. I know there's something in the room because I could feel it and I could feel that primal fear. And the only thing that takes it away is prayer. So that's something. And through all, like, it's kind of like the old Edge saying, right? My cup is too full, right? And maybe there's something with my name and like really believing in something, because I used to think that religion, or not religion, but believing in God was easy until you try it, right? Until you actually try to disprove it and you try to do the work and you try to really let go. And that's the fucking hardest thing, in my
Yeah.
opinion. And that's kind of at that line I've been at. And I continue to read all these other books and studies, but I feel like inherently, like, that's the way I was designed. And that's how I hope others um, come to these general understandings for themselves, right? Because they'll be like, have you read this or have you thought about that? I'm like, yeah, actually, I have. And this is what I think about it. And this is the point that I've come to. But at the end of the day, it's to each their own. Like it's
Right.
each person's decision to decide to believe or understand whatever, right? And I'm not here. I feel like I'm here more as a guide than as anything else, right? And I feel like that's what we elders, right? That's what we all are, right? Is we have these life experiences, and they used to do them in tribes, right? They had the shaman or the wise man and they used to take their problems to him, or like, oh yeah, I heard this story, and then they help them figure stuff out. But at the end of the day, the person had to make the decision for themselves.
Yeah.
And as parents, that's what we are. And that's,
Yeah. That's kind of the role
yeah,
we take on.
it
Yeah.
takes a village, right? If
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's funny because you refer to us as the elderly, and that's what we are now,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
How did we get here? Where did the time go?
yeah,
But yeah, absolutely, man. Well, that's good. That's good. And like I said, I've got to take some of those titles and write them down and add them to my Amazon lists and pick up a read here and there. But to the point that you made about taking all these different ideas and concepts and comparing them to one another and then kind of discerning through that and coming up with your truth, that's powerful and that's important, and I think more people need to do that, right? It's just take different perspectives, take different ideas, and um take them for what they're worth, and you may believe some and not believe others, and um, it's important to feed the mind and uh, you know come to your own ideas or concepts and push those forward.
yeah.
Yeah.
I, and I think I kind of going back to adopted ideas, right? And I feel like even people like uh that believe in something, right? A lot of we're lazy by nature, right? Most of
Sure.
us anyways. And a lot of people end up believing things that because somebody else told them to believe
Right.
in it, right? Or they've never read this or that, and so they just believe it blindly. And I think that's equally as dangerous, right?
For sure.
Because and for me, it's like I remember my kids. I was talking to them once, and then I think they were asking me if I believe in God or something, but which is a very broad question, right? Because it's just like, well, what is God? Like, what is your definition of God, right? Either way, but I know that they were asking more specifically, like, you know, God, Jesus, right, and Christianity, if you will. They grew up Catholic, but I remember being at the point where I didn't want to lie to them, right, and I was like I'm still searching, and long story short, I was like, because when you see me believe in something, like when I know, you'll know. And what I mean by that is like I've done my due diligence, and I really want to like have done the work to truly understand what I'm believing in, right? And I know at some point, and even with like you talk about Nikola Tesla, you talk about Carl Jung, you talk about Albert Einstein. They all hit this point where even in their specific
Field.
field, they hit a point where there's like there's something else because I've been in this one specific field for this long, and now I can't explain what's going on. There's something I don't know what that is, but that's that line, right? That's that line of even in religion. I feel there's that line of you have to that leap of faith,
Right.
right? And for some people, it's easy. For me, it's not, right? And well, I don't want to speak for everyone. I just say for me, it's like I have to take on all this information. I continue to, but even though I've had these things happen to me that I cannot explain, and they were very profound, if you will. And I say that with the idea, if I would have heard myself saying this like 10, 15 years ago, I'm like, get the fuck out of here. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? This dude saying he's talk to God. Like, no, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm just saying that there's something that's kept me from going to that party. There's something that's something that was like very like I could feel like something like don't go, you
Yeah.
know, and I listened and something happened.
Yeah. Hearing you talk about this subject, about God and Christianity and having that intuition,
Hmm.
right? Those feelings. You, I remember your mom used to bring up, similar.
Yeah.
We used to have similar conversations about that, and it wasn't more like it wasn't so much like motherly intuition, because obviously there's that, but from a religious, from a spiritual aspect, I do remember your mom having those. I think in Spanish they're referred to as intuition is referred to as the spiritual intuition, and not even spiritual, just intuition in general. But it's like a don. Uh, that's what it's called in Spanish. It's like this ability to kind of like to feel like God talking to
Hmm.
you and kind of guiding you, whether it's to do something or not to do something. But maybe that's something that was passed down
Yeah.
uh,
And
from your mom to you.
I remember my mom talking about these things, and I remember like being like, "Man, you're fucking crazy." You know what I mean? Like, and like we used to be able to talk to each other
Sure, sure,
like
yeah,
that. That's
yeah,
the way she was. Um, but she was like, "Órale, you're calling me crazy? Te sales," you know?
right,
But like, but seriously, like, because I mean, how can you? It's like we were talking about earlier, right? She's trying to give these keys, right? These keys of wisdom, but in the world and like in especially in our school system and society and even now, like I mean, I think now it's being more talked about um because it's trendy or whatever, but there's something there, right? There's a spiritual aspect of our existence that we don't fully understand, and maybe some do more than others, but it's been uh it's been co-opted by like the woo woo people that like try to make money off of it or the whatever it is that they do. And because of that, like it's not taken as seriously, or it's been chalked off as like even like back in the day, like you're crazy, right? Like if you have this connection with God or something bigger than yourself, then you're automatically like that.
yeah,
You're not like well, like us, right? Or maybe there's like a jealousy within it, right? Or some type of envy, right? Like, well, I haven't heard it, whatever. So you must be crazy. But I don't know, man. Like there is something there. Like the trip to Scotland last year. I haven't talked about this. I talked about this. I didn't not fully, but that talk I went to in DC,
mm-hmm,
and I started it with like I feel like there needs to be a disclaimer here because this experience is probably not going to be the same as others. But crazy enough, Robert Irvine came on after I was done, and he was like, he's saying his first trip over there, he had a similar experience. So that kind of validated what I said, right? And but what I didn't say was the week before, the week before I was supposed to go to Scotland. Like one, I didn't know how far it was. Like I knew how long it was, but I thought it was gonna be like a couple of days. And until Sandy read the description, and she was like, you got to do this in 24 hours, right? I'm like, I do now. What was it, 56 miles or 54 miles in 24 hours?
Wow.
And but the week before, I was sitting in the living room, and I was sitting in the living room, and sometimes I just sit down and I meditate, or I wasn't, but I just kind of sit quietly and kind of like passive thoughts or whatever. And this isn't, well, this I'll just speak about this one time, and it wasn't audibly. I didn't hear out loud, but something told me, like, um, as I was sitting there contemplating this thing that I've never done before, right? And I didn't even have a long time to prepare for it. And I asked for donations, right, for it, for this nonprofit, which was Allied Forces, Operation Allied Forces. And I'm like, I feel like I need to complete it, right? Because I don't want to be a liar, right? But as I'm sitting there or whatever, just like, man, can I do this and all these things? And then something was told me like, you're gonna meet God next week. Like next week, you're gonna meet God or something like in Scotland. And I was like, honestly, I was like, what the fuck does that mean? Am I gonna die? Like, that's kind of what I thought about. Like, and I started to get this fear, like maybe I shouldn't go, because like, what if the plane's gonna go down or something? And then I remember just kind of like going back to the kidney donation, which I something I never really talk about. Um, I had this line where I could have just backed out, but I was just like,
You let it go.
I gotta let go. If I die, I could die. And I remember telling Sandy, like, hey, this is what I heard, and she's kind of become aware of like, I'm pretty open with her a lot of these things, and so I went, and I kind of didn't think about it again, but it was wild to have that because it was like we landed on a Friday afternoon, we dropped our bags off at the hotel, we went to go sign in to this massive event, and we get our numbers and whatever, and then the event's on Saturday morning. So Saturday morning, Sunday morning, it was over. We fly out Monday morning. So it was like a turn and burn. We go, and I really didn't have time to think, right? And then it was just like we were like, hey, let's go take a picture, yada yada. Like at the start, because initially the plan was we're gonna get there, we're gonna have breakfast, we're gonna talk, we're gonna stretch. Okay, we got time. And then we're there, and then like some stuff happened in the morning. We didn't show up on time, and then they're like, hey, let's go take a picture. Luckily, I put water in my bladder, right? In my camelback,
Mm-hmm.
my pack. We went to the starting line. We took a picture, and I'm thinking we're gonna take a picture and go back and go eat breakfast. We go take a picture, and
Yep.
they're like, blah blah blah. Like the Scottish guys on the thing. And he's like, all right, 3, 2, 1. Da-da-da. The bagpipes start playing. And we just go, dude. And I'm like, I guess we're going. But that entire experience, dude, like I would get like that same tone of voice, the same message or different like, but it was the same like so before that there was at times where I just got emotional, dude. I'm walking. I mean, granted it was beautiful. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I was just kind of like one step at a time, And the beauty was it was very beautiful, right? But that's not what made me emotional. I just got emotional and I started crying. I'm like, fucking walking. There's other people. I'm like, what is going on? And but every time I thought about stopping, um, I would have that same voice. Like, if you keep coming, I'll show you more. And
Wow.
the beauty of I met God through the land and the people. Like I've never had people so kind and willing to help you. And there was aid stations throughout the entire thing. I've never been at an event like this. I've done like races here, and yeah, they'll have like an aid station here and there. But like to have it over the span of 54 miles, through the Highlands of Scotland and like these remote places. At least they seem remote to me.
And all the participants were all veterans
Yeah,
from different countries, like from
different countries like Ireland, Scotland, from France,
obviously U.S.
Aussies, yeah, U.S. And we're like the whole point of this is to get us together and to raise money for, or at least the nonprofit that I was there in partnership with, the Robert Irwin Foundation, was uh, Allied Forces, where they raise money for Allied Forces because they don't have the same benefits as veterans we do have in the States. We're blessed to have all the benefits that we do have, and the and I know the VA catches a lot of shit. My personal experience, yeah, I've had some shitty VA people that I've come across, but the entire process overall, I'd say like has been very beneficial and helpful for me on various levels, right? And that's my experience. But either way, but yeah, so I had that experience with the people and like even at the 36 mile mark,
Scenery is beautiful.
scenery is beautiful, the people, the conversations, and then like at mile 36, there's like a tent, and then that was a whole thing, right? Because my clothes are wet because you're going through all these different like weather patterns that are changing. It was sleeting, it was cold, raining, sunny, and then it's like so it's the gambit, right? And then you're going through a marsh, like a swamp marsh. You have to pick your steps because I didn't have waterproof shoes. And like, plus you're tired. My knee locked up with my mile 18, so I'm walking fucking peg leg with like these sticks and stuff, or the walking sticks. Um, and then uh, even like going up to mile 36, I met up with some guy named Craig, British guy, and we have this great conversation. We're talking and whatever, and he's like, "I don't think you should go on, mate." He's like, "I don't think you're gonna make it. It's gonna be nice. It's gonna be dark, whatever, whatever." And I was like, I'll wait till I get there and I'll decide, right? And then I get up in there. They make me eat because they're like, we don't, because they have masseuse there. And then they have people that will pop your blisters and like tape you up and check you, right? So I get there, I lay down, but they were like, did you eat? I'm like, no. So they're like, you need to go eat because you could pass out. So I want to go eat, and they made me eat because your adrenaline's running,
Sure.
right? So you're like, I don't want to eat. So they made me eat. I lay down, and then like they're massaging my quads because my neck was on fire, like just because I got neck issues, and then
Hmm.
like plus the pack and everything else. And then I was trying to get them to massage out my leg, um, just so I could keep going. But I was at that tent for like 2, maybe 3 hours, maybe I don't know. It seemed like a long time, longer than I wanted to be there, and I was still like questioning: should I keep going? It's gonna be dark. And then on top of that, you can't leave that tent unless you're there with somebody else. At that point, it's a yomp, so it's your own marching pace. So at that point, you have to like a lot of people stopped at bronze. I didn't know you could stop at bronze and silver. I learned all that there because I didn't do any research. So they stopped there, and then the other two guys that continued on. One, they were both ahead of me, right? So I got to this tent, and I didn't have anybody with me. And then there was a 3 hour fiasco, right? Of like your clothes are wet, you need to change your clothes, can't find your pack, you have to go change in the ambulance. It was a whole thing. But the way it worked out was exactly the way it needed to work out because there was a guy named Neil and Lisa, and they're like the guys that kind of bring up the rear, the last ones. And they were just about to head out. And they were a godsend, dude, because I wouldn't be able to complete the entire thing without them. Like if there were a camera crew that could have followed along with us, dude, it would have been like good for like a story, right? Because they were literally he's an endurance athlete. He does that back and forth and went like in a couple of days or whatever. And he was literally lighting the path for me. Like it's at night, you're going through these like fields with like sheep, and like there's like all these holes and this off camber, and you got to go over these like wooden bridges over fences. And
So I'm thinking you're on pavement the whole time. You're
no,
not. No, Ash. You're not following streets or anything. This is
no, there was at
all
one
kinds
point
of terrain.
it was at one point where there was a street and it was like winding and stuff, but the
But
rest of it is just like um country roads, like gravel, steep, like both down and up.
wow.
And on top of that, you're going through these like farmers fields and stuff, and
Okay.
it's at night. But the conversations that we're having, like with these perfect strangers, you know what I mean? And like sharing part of my story, is sharing part of his story. We're both like, shedding tears, like, we just met, you know what I mean? But like I'm, have you heard, you know what a flow state is? Like,
Flow state.
it's like in the zone. I'm in the zone,
Okay.
but so the flow state is the zone, right? And that's where you're everything just like you're almost on autopilot, but you're like in this flow where you don't feel any pain, or you're just kind of just going, right? But I've experienced that in riding, I've experienced that in running, but like in very short spurts. But in like this long trek, that I felt it. Oh no, I didn't feel it. I felt it, and I was in it a lot longer, and it's pretty wild, like to hit those barriers that you thought you could, and then just overcome them. But with that, if they weren't leaving, or they weren't exactly there when we're supposed, I would have finished it, because there was like nobody else to go with. And the way they lit the way, the conversations we had, and then even in the morning, like like we had to go through a the last 8 miles was like through a town. But like, so when your knees are locked up and you're in pain and tired, like the hard impact of the concrete and the cobblestone and like the stairs and all these things, and then plus you're tired, you're hungry, all these things, and it's just like, but we found like this extra gear, and we passed like 3 aid stations because we were short on time. I finished it in 24 hours and 25 hours, and there was people calling him the Neo to like make us like stop, but he was like,
No, we're gonna finish.
yeah, we're gonna finish. And dude, like when we got done, dude, and I called Sandy because I didn't talk to her the whole time. Like I just started crying, dude. Like it's like all this adrenaline and everything was just dumped, whatever it was, but it was like this shedding of self. And then I got to talk to her, so I'm in a vulnerable state. So, and then it was wild because his name was Neil. And then like when I'm talking to her, and she pointed this out earlier, he was gonna come tell me something. He was kneeling while like I was like saying this, like crying to her, and he took in the moment, man. But it was just like this. eh, I think what when I so going back to God, it wasn't like I didn't see God on the throne or nothing like that, but it was the sheer love of compassion of people, and like what that could be like and what that is. And at that time,
That's deep.
like everything that you kind of see on the news and everything we kind of talked about earlier, like I still had that lens on, right? Um, but to see the other side of it, and especially being in the nonprofit space, and see that like that's all this good in the world like doesn't get highlighted enough, and
Yeah.
that's equally fighting the evil that happens every, because there is evil in this world.
Yeah. And to your point, that's really all we see
Yeah,
is the evil. We don't see enough of the good.
yeah,
Um, but wow, man, that's powerful. That's a powerful story. And I was listening to you, and I was like, is he gonna tie this back to that voice, right? That you're gonna meet God in
yeah,
Scotland, and then you just tied it back to just the compassion and the love for one another.
yeah,
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
yeah. Like I got back and I wrote down a bunch of like words that kind of came to me, and some thoughts about it. But that was so that experience on its own, on top of all the other ones in my life, that and it and even with that, like I hate to say this out loud, but I still have doubt, right? And it's I don't know what that is, but once I let go, once I find where I think I know we all know the answer, right? Like inherently what that is. And I think the path is somewhere in the middle, because I feel like there's just, for me personally, and maybe for you, there's just like divide, right? Where part of my childhood was brought up in Christianity, and then it was also like I hated. I don't say I hated to say it, but like Native American beliefs, or like another word is brujeria, right? But those are pretty much like native practices, but it's all on what you tie it to is good or evil, right?
Right.
So like I have like this split in belief systems, right? And I feel uh like then that's the split I have, right? Because I do have this, like riding mountain bikes and stuff like that. I did find God back in that way, like being in nature, right? And it was the trails here, dude, in San Antonio, right? Was somewhere like that we weren't, at least I wasn't exposed to as a kid.
Sure.
We just had the neighborhood, right? But to
Yeah, our
be
trails were very different.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I'm not trying to make this all about me, man. This
Sure.
is just kind of where it's going, but I think it's this connection. I'm barely getting the confidence to talk about it because of the fear that I have of how it could be perceived and misunderstood, right? Or at the very least, like how I could be misinterpreted as like I think I'm this or that, right? And it's not like I think I have this healthy, lucid understanding of what it is and what it isn't, right? For myself. And but yeah, to uh learn to be back in, not learn, but yeah, I guess relearn how to be back in nature. And like that's a very broad term, but once you start doing it and you do it often, you start to, at least for me, I started to reconnect and then tie these like these similarities like of like the tree bark in our skin, the way that the tree branches, especially in the winter, you could see the way they grow and it looks like our lungs, right? Because like if you look at a picture of our lungs, you could see all the ventricles and what
Hmm.
have you, and then the way they communicate with each other. Trees communicate with each other, like when one is getting bit or not bit, but consumed by like caterpillars or whatever, it like sends things to like take the caterpillars off. And I'm jacking this up. I'm not a fucking arborist or nothing, but there's something in that, and there's like the greater thing, and that's kind of what this podcast and all these stories, right? Feel like I've been taking all these data points of people's stories and these conversations, and then like other people smarter than me, and just tying these like data points and get them on a wall big enough, it helps paint the bigger thing that which we're all lacking, especially in our society today, and it's something greater than ourselves. Because if we try to depend on each other, what I've learned personally in my personal experience, yes, you could try to heal for somebody else, and you could try to depend on somebody else, but they are human and they will fail you at some point.
Right.
And so you need something bigger than yourself to depend on. Whatever that is for that person, or whatever it is will kind of help them start getting pull themselves out of the mud. Um, and like I said before, like if it's a goldfish or whatever, but understand whatever it is you choose, even if it's a person, that whatever that thing is temporary, and you need to find something else, like another rung to keep pulling yourself up,
Interesting.
until you find that connection of that something greater than yourself. Um, I feel like I said a lot, but
No, I mean it's no, and thanks for sharing. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to unpack there, man, for sure. Talking about like earlier, I asked you about, Crashing Convos, how you came to that name and that background, or that graphic, and you've talked about the connection with the universe, like something bigger than yourself. Um, Not connecting with just people, but nature and space and everything around us. And I mean, that's deep, and that's something that I don't think I've explored enough.
mhm,
I don't think we've touched on this, but working in corporate America, it's easy to just get locked in to the everyday grind and the routine of going to work and doing your job and going home, you know, eating dinner, getting ready for bed, and then wake up and do it all over again, right? Just it's that routine, and sometimes I know I'm guilty of it. I haven't taken enough to kind of just um look at things from different lenses and make connections. Of course, I make connection with people. I talk to people every day. I've got my network of friends and etc. But looking beyond that, you know, that's something I need to do a better job of. Um, even I know we've touched on religion and God and faith. That's something that I I too have not really explored. Growing up Catholic, you know, having to go to, I say having to go, but
mhm,
I I was put in catechism and doing my communion, doing my confirmation, etc. Like we were Catholics, right? Until my mom said we weren't, which happened, later in her life, and she was like, she didn't agree with everything that was going on in the Catholic Church, so we went from being Catholic to just being Christians and non-denomination, and just focusing more on the Bible, and just really trying to develop a relationship with God
Mm.
in whatever way that was it, whether it was through prayer, or whether it was through, reading the Bible, and living through that scripture, right? Because that's the guardrails of life, right? It's uh, the Bible. It tells you what you should and shouldn't be doing, and it has all these great stories, and um, all these events. But I feel like since my mom passed, I think that for me, I am spiritual. I'm not religious. I don't practice any one type of religion. Um, and I do have my conversations with God. I do have a relationship with Him. To your point, I don't know exactly who that is, or or if I truly have a good understanding of the purpose that he, or maybe even she, should be serving in my life, or how I can serve God in my life. Uh, I don't think I take enough time to truly try to understand that. Um, so a lot of things that I'm taking away from this conversation that I probably need to start exploring. You know what I mean? Obviously, you've had some time to dive into a lot of different topics and read a lot of different books. But going back to how I kicked off this part of the conversation, you know, corporate America is not. It takes up a lot of time, man. Trying to be a project professional, and providing for the family and stuff, and not making enough time to look at other things, and how all they can, how they all connect. Um, but yeah, you put a lot of things in perspective for me. Is basically what I'm getting at.
Got you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not to say, yeah, and that's fair, man. I mean, and I think about that often, right? Like how it's like some people are like just so caught up in life, right?
Yep.
Because they don't have a moment to breathe every time like there's something else happens, right? And they have to put out the next fire and the next fire and the next fire, right? But I think one of the very basic things that disconnected us from something bigger is the invention of light, um, and light pollution, and just to look up at the stars. I've always kind of been fascinated looking at the stars, and um, but that very thing, right, is just to look up and see like stars in general. And like if you ever go out like if you go to Big Bend and go camping and you just look up at the stars or wherever you can see where there's like it's like and to
Yeah.
see like the Milky Way,
Yep.
it's like it's
Yeah,
just
no,
like
no, I
homie.
and I, and I do know, because I did have those. I'm gonna share this. I've had those experiences as recently as, I don't know, maybe a year and a half ago, where in my own backyard, I'd look out. This is before everything was getting developed, and this is kind of where I'm going to go with the story. But um, I used to be able to see, the Big Dipper, and the belt of
Orion.
Orion, and just on a normal, clear night, because there's no city lights. There were no city lights back where, where I live, until they decided to build a gas station directly behind my house,
Oh,
and now they've got these LED lights lighting up the parking lot, and I can't see that anymore, and
yeah,
and I and, and I curse that gas station every time I see it, so because it's like literally right behind my house.
yeah.
We talked about the stone fence that you have in the back of
Mm-hmm.
your house. Well, there's a stone wall, and then there's the damn uh,
Gas
gas
station.
station, and my wife and I always talk about it, like, we need to move. The hell
Yeah.
with this place, you know what I mean? Not that I would look at them often, but if I wanted to, and I look up,
Yeah.
and I get that feeling of, man, like, I'm just a little part of this big universe. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm just one little piece,
Yeah.
you know? And so, but yeah, um, I don't have that luxury anymore. Now I got to drive further out to the country to take that in. But yeah, I definitely get your point, and I do get a sense of, as I mentioned, like being something very small in something very big.
Right. And it's also like at the very basis, right? It starts to invoke the curiosity, like, man,
Out there.
yeah, what's out there? Like what's further? Like, well, how did all this come to be?
Yep.
And you can talk about like the Big Bang and all these things, and but at the very basis of it, like it takes you out of this world and like considers other ideas, and that idea is, the idea of God, right? And some people listen to it, and it's interesting. Like Ted Lasso, right? Going back to Ted Lasso, I have Ted Lasso socks. They were given to me
Nice.
as a gift, and so there's like different ones,
What
right?
did they believe? Did they believe on him?
Yeah. So believe was one of them, and I at first I didn't notice it, but until I did notice it, right? When I would wear them out in public, because I wear like crazy socks because it offsets my resting bitch face.
Okay.
But people would get uneasy when they would read believe, right? And if you've never seen Ted Lasso, like some people, I feel like a lot of people, and then maybe it's just me, but they tie it to religion. Like it's just the word believe, right? But it brings up something in them where they get uncomfortable or they keep looking down or whatever, and they get angry, right? Or like, or they'll move, right? And maybe it's something I said, maybe I stunk. I'm not really sure, but I started to wear them just to invoke the idea of the conversation, right? Because I was like, oh, I'm curious, like if I'm hoping somebody asks me, right? Because it's like, well, what is your definition of belief, right? You have to believe that if you're gonna plan to buy a house, that you're gonna be here the next day. Like not everything is to, but it's interesting to me and that interesting thought experiment that people in already kind of come with this like preconceived idea of whatever one word is or like faith, right? And they tie it to whatever negative experiences they potentially had, right? Um, and I just think that's interesting, like how we become so divisive in that. And don't get me wrong, I do understand because I stayed away from religion for a long time because if you talk about like the Crusades and all these different things that have happened, or not, the Spanish, there's the Spanish Inquisition. Um, but to go back further in history, there's other reasons that those things happen, right? Because there was Christians being persecuted, and so that started the Crusades. Long story short, like, but there was these things that I thought I knew until I started digging, and be like, oh, like this is an adopted idea that I got from somebody else, and I didn't even do the research. And like it's interesting how we do that, and we just kind of take things as is because somebody that we feel that knows everything and
Yeah.
then and
You,
take it.
we're talking about like our parents, our uncles,
Yeah,
people that we looked up to, people that we grew up with, that we trusted.
right.
It's almost whatever they spoke is the truth. Why doubt it? Why question it? Right. Um, I think you and I grew up very similar in that way, and uh, and it was almost and not just on the topic of religion or belief, but it was almost if you questioned it, which I didn't, you were being disobedient. You were
Disrespectful.
disrespectful,
Yeah.
and you couldn't do that to your parents. We live in a different time now, but looking back, it was just like their word is their
Hmm.
word. You take it for what it is, and you run with it as the truth. And to use your term, that it's an adopted idea, that this was passed on to me by people that I trust.
Right.
So it's got to be the truth, right? So yeah, that's very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, we don't know what we don't know, but either way, I mean, and yeah, and kind of going back to it, kind of where we started all this, like all these life experiences have kind of brought us to this point, right? In this point in this conversation,
Yeah.
like because it's all relative. Like everything that's happened to us, and if we choose to see things as just as they are and not get wrapped around the axle of like what is done to you or vice versa, even though that's part of the process, like we can learn from them and definitely grow from them, right? And we're never, like you said earlier, we're never going to stop growing because once you stop growing, you start dying.
That's it.
Whether that's learning physically, mentally, or whatever. But yeah, man. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Me too, man. And I, not only was it good to catch up with you, obviously I consider you like a brother. To use the term, was a brother from a different mother. You know, I've known you since we were missing uh, kid teeth when our kids' teeth were
Yeah.
falling out. That's how long we've known each other. But it was good to catch up with you, not only just in person and just having these conversations, but really getting to understand how it is that you think and how you see the world. Definitely offers a different perspective and hopes open doors for me to kind of go out and explore and learn about some of these things that, as I mentioned, just the daily grind hasn't allowed me
Mm.
to really take the time to do that. Busy with family, etc. And I'm hoping to retire in 7 more years, and I hope those 7 years come faster than than um, than I think, so that I can really have some time to do stuff that I truly enjoy. Um, but to the point you made earlier, like we can't we got to live for today. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I can't be pushing stuff off 7 years and think, that I'll be around in 7 years, because I may not be. Right?
Right.
Take advantage, seize the moment today. But nah, you've inspired me to do a lot of different things that I didn't even really consider coming into to this discussion. But you've piqued my curiosity on a lot of things, so I thank you for that.
Yeah, man. I appreciate you. I appreciate you being so transparent and sharing what you shared. Also for and for those of you that this was last minute, and this was last minute because I mean, one, we've been trying to do this forever, but he put something in your story,
Yeah,
and
Instagram stories.
yeah, I don't even know if it's still there, but it said something along the lines of, and I'm probably gonna butcher this, but it said something like, "Be with folks that are willing to talk about pretty much more deeper conversations,
Yes.
um, life, this, that, and like God, and not about other people."
Right.
Right?
That's right. Yeah, it was something to that extent, right? I mean, it wasn't not verbatim, but God was definitely part of it. God, dreams, goals. Um, surround yourself with people that or sit at a table where those are the topics, and not sitting down to talk about other people, which we all can easily fall into those traps,
Right.
right? And I think that's what spurred this,
Yeah.
and here I am.
Yeah.
2 hours later.
Yeah. 2 hours later. 2 hours later. But yeah, dude. And that's kind of where maybe it's this part of my life now, but I find it challenging to, I mean, to stay high level with like superficial conversations.
Right.
I can do it. But one of the questions that I've noticed that it irks me the most, I mean, maybe it's because it's so hard for me to answer. And I'm trying to dial that in, but it's like the first thing people ask you is like, what do you do?
Oh,
What do you
yeah.
do for work? You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that's like a good icebreaker. But it's like, I think this last 5, 6 years, it's, I don't know what the person does until like years after I know them, like
Yeah.
riding on the trails. I'm like, holy shit, you're a doctor? You know what I mean? Like, I never
Yeah.
would have thought that.
Yeah, and that's a good point, and I'm glad you brought that up, because you know, being in the circle right now, the circle that I'm in right now, revolves around, you know, high school baseball.
Hmm.
My son's in high school playing baseball right now, and so we're spending a lot of time, and I'm getting to meet a lot of people, for the first time. Um, and to your point, that's not the thing I open up with, and that doesn't even come up in conversation. It's not a question I ask in conversation. I get to try to learn the guy or the person first, and let them volunteer that information, right?
Hmm.
um and let's just let that come out through normal conversation. But you're right that a lot of people, even to this day, Because it was even more common back in the day, but even to this day, like that's one of the first things they ask: "What do you do for a living?" You know,
Yeah.
why does that matter? You know, why does that matter right now?
Right. Yeah.
Maybe let's get to know each other better and we become friends, and then I can tell you, and then who knows? Like, yeah, there's just people who are they're very they're very quick to try to start a network. And okay, I need to know what it, or you're a lawyer, okay, I need to put you in my back pocket
Hmm.
in case I need you one day. Oh, you're a doctor, what kind of doctor? And yeah, you're right,
Yeah.
that is very superficial. And it's still very much prevalent today in conversation. I try not to go there. If they want to
Right.
volunteer that information, great, but it's not going to make me think any differently of you if you're, and not to take anything away, but if you're a manager at McDonald's versus, a criminal defense lawyer.
Right.
I want to get to know you first, see what type of person you are before I ask that question.
Yeah. And that's something. And I've even seen it go the other way, where somebody's asked me that question. It was just after I just retired. It was an older guy, and he asked me that question. And then when I told him, like, I forgot what I was doing, what I told him, but I was like, I'm working with a nonprofit or something, and he like just immediately stopped talking to me, and I was just like, whatever. Like
Yeah,
I've just learned to kind of just let it go. I'm like, oh, whatever, dude.
yeah, yeah. Because it's like at that point that he made the determination to say that, oh, he can't do anything for me.
Yeah,
I don't need him in my circle. That's not somebody I want in my network,
yeah,
right? I'm not saying that he was thinking that, but that's probably how it played out,
right.
right? The way it did. But you're right. I mean, there's
And,
people are especially, and not to stereotype, but I will. But I see that a lot in the younger people, and I'll even put them in an age group like the 30 to 40 year olds
mhm,
that are right now really trying to get their career, going, or continue to go, climb up the proverbial ladder.
right,
There's a lot of hungry professionals out there that are really big on trying to establish their networks, um, for personal gain, of course.
right.
Um, so yeah, no, I don't think I was ever that type, and that's probably why I am where I am in my career. But I'm perfectly okay with where I'm at, with that. But yeah, there's people who are just they're determined
Yeah,
to make as much money, and to get that, very important job title, and that just doesn't move me.
yeah. Blinded
And
by the carrot.
that's it. That's
Yeah,
it. Yeah. I'm trying to exit the race. I ain't trying to stay in it. You know what I mean?
yeah,
I'm
dude.
getting old, but yeah,
Yeah,
I'm with you on that 100%, man.
yeah,
I'm with you on that 100%. But I have similar experiences for sure.
yeah. But dude, like, I love you, man. I appreciate you.
Love you, brother.
Yeah, and
Love you.
thank you. I mean, like I said, we could have did this privately, could have did a podcast. I mean, I know we talked about you coming on before, and I think it worked out great.
Yeah, man. It felt like a natural conversation. We touched on a lot of different topics, and I appreciate the opportunity. And now we really need to do a better job of staying in touch.
Yeah, do you know where I live now? I'll
Yeah.
go to your house too.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure. Even though it's about an hour away.
that's fine, dude. We're so used to doing that, like with rides and
Sure.
stuff. Like it's not even a big deal anymore. It's like we don't even think
Yeah.
about it anymore.
Yeah. And I might take you up on the offer and maybe start doing some mountain
Yeah,
biking.
dude.
Yeah.
I'll show you the bikes here shortly, dude.
Awesome, man. Well, if
Uh,
there's anything I can do for you or your charity, not your charity, your nonprofit, man,
yeah,
I'm here to support you in any way I can, brother.
yeah, man. I appreciate you. And just to be fair, I gotta give credit to Jonathan Hagerman's nonprofit. He's the founder, but I've been part of it since pretty much its inception, and I do all I can to support it. But yeah, man,
Yeah.
I appreciate you.
Well, yeah, I don't know him, and
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
probably get to meet him soon. But I see dirt bike therapy, and I
Oh
think
yeah.
Simon Garcia.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's why
Yeah,
I just make that association,
I
man.
know. When I did that, and we'll end her after this, but when I did that speech in
DC.
DC, they let off with that, and I fucking texted them right away. I was like, "Hey, dude, like they put me as the co-founder. I'm not." He's like, "Nah, don't worry about it, dude. Yeah, yeah." He's a good dude, man. I hope you meet him one day, and he's a super good dude.
Yeah.
But
Cool.
thank you everyone for listening. I appreciate y'all's support and your time listening to this podcast. Like I said, this is my brother from another mother. Known each other for a long time, and hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. If you guys could, if you got something from this, can you, and you think somebody else would benefit from it, can please share it. It's on Spotify, Pandora, wherever you stream podcasts, also on YouTube. Appreciate y'all supporting your time. Thank you, and you'll have a great one.